Our first keynote speaker and career champion, Dr. Vida Samuel, is an assistant professor in residence in the Department of Human Development and Family Sciences at the University of Connecticut in Stamford. Professor Samuel is a scholar in women's studies and intercultural communication and teaches courses in sexuality, human development, and research methods. She is a member of the undergraduate and graduate teaching faculty and is a faculty affiliate at the Center for Applied Research and Human Development at UConn and an academic advisor at the Stamford campus. Professor Samuel earned a Master's of Arts in Speech and Interpersonal Communication from New York University and a PhD with a focus in intercultural communication and women's studies at Howard University. She also holds a certificate in culinary arts. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Vida Samuel.
Thank you so very much, Christina, for that very, very vibrant and true introduction, by the way, because as women, we tend to downplay our own efforts. Thank you very much. And welcome to everybody. Good morning. I'm thrilled to be the keynote for the Center for Career Development's inaugural Career Everywhere Recognition and Celebration Ceremony. Days before I was invited to speak, I was asked what I thought I would be doing in my retirement. It was a serious question. It was a serious question because my birthday seems to be coming fast and furiously every year. And while the original question was not meant for me, somehow I got lassoed into answering that question with some sense of earnestness. After all, these days, annual birthdays feel as if they're happening every 6 months. So I said it had to be a role where I'm still providing guidance to young women and men. Without missing a beat, a 9-year-old offered that I should be a school crossing guard. So here it is. I now have a post-retirement plan that really does include explicit guidance for young women and men. So, 9-year-olds tend to conceive of adult issues in a much more simplistic way, perhaps the way we should also think about life goals and plans. I know this because I teach human development courses. Additionally, the Center for Career Development simplifies and eases what we often think is the most stressful time in students' lives. So I get the feeling the center would have provided me with the same sage advice. And by the way, for the record, I'm actually nowhere near retirement. As an academic and club advisor, in addition to thinking through goals and plans based on someone's place in the life cycle, I think about issues at the intersection of race, culture, ethnicity, religion, ability, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, education level, and any condition that either oppresses or privileges one's possibilities. My scholarship in intercultural communication requires that I think through significant and less important matters through an intercultural lens. Intercultural communication requires us to think about what is in front of us before we say anything and before we act upon a deed. It is considering someone else's experience prior to responding to a request or acting on their behalf. Cultural differences affect how we see each other and therefore how we communicate with each other. The principle underlying intercultural communication theory is that it applies equally to domestic cultural differences such as ethnicity and gender, and to international differences such as those associated with nationality or world region. Communication, though, is much more than a simple transmission of information. And for those of you who teach communication, you know that of public speaking. It is the mutual creation of meaning. Information is not in itself meaningful. It is only when information is intended and interpreted in some way that it achieves significance. The Intercultural Development Research Institute explains the sense of culture used in intercultural communication is that of worldview. Culture is a generalization about how a group of people coordinate meaning and action among themselves. One way they do that is through institutions such as religious, political, and economic systems, and family and other social structures. But underlying these conditions is a habitual organization of how the world is perceived, and thus how it is experienced. Much like our school community does with the school's history and mission statement, it is an agreement that contributes to our understanding of the university's promise to its community. These habits are often referred to as cultural assumptions and values, and they occur in all groups, not just national societies. In general, intercultural communication focuses on this worldview aspect of culture and not so much on the institutions of culture. And again, the Intercultural Development Research Institute emphasizes that human communication is conducted by people, not institutions. An essential element of culture is the boundary that distinguishes us from them. Every human being belongs to groups defined by boundaries. What I've come to learn from scholarship, teaching, and personal experiences is that we all have a standpoint that contributes to both our behavior and our decision-making. Sometimes these standpoints are a source of our boundaries. In all things we do, we bring with us the sum of our experiences. For example, our religion, our gender, our culture, ability, familial traditions and language, the symbolic meanings of socioeconomic status, idioms, and basic ideas of how we might fit in is central to how we make decisions. This is true in an academic setting, social clubs, casual encounters, and certainly professional settings. At some point in our lives, we must necessarily, or we have, made decisions about a preferred profession, a workplace where we want to pursue our education, communities in which we live, our friends, our social circles, our houses of worship, and our hobbies. That negotiation often involves our immediate needs, not the needs of others. Though it is helpful to consider the materiality of others' lives, particularly if our lives will eventually intersect with theirs. It is how we expand our worldview. And so I promise this is not code for anything other than asking us to intentionally consider how we deliberate on our students' lives, our relationships with our colleagues, and the value of this alliance with the Center for Career Development. As an undergraduate student, my work study assignments were established by the Career Center at my college. So my relationship with any career center began more than 3 decades ago, and it hasn't stopped. The things I believed were important then are still important today because my students have some of the same concerns. For example, how to explore internships and volunteer opportunities, summer employment, part-time jobs while at school, and what to do with life after graduation. I got my first summer job at the college library through our career center. The library is where I discovered my allergy to dust because my job that summer was to relocate some very old and valuable texts that had not been touched in a decade. As a graduate student, my resume was reviewed and revised continually. And the Career Center director at Howard University was instrumental in transforming my resume into a working curriculum vitae during my doctoral study. So I understand well the importance of these services to me, the significance of career coaches' expertise, and the fact that it is a considerable part of the university's commitment to students. The office is staffed with experts like Tara Malone, Christina Bedini, and Susan O'Connor, those are the ones I know well, who are always so generous with their time, not because they have to, but because they take student engagement seriously. While my relationship with career coaches remains constant in my life, and in a different context, the needs of today's students are fluid, requiring that we offer very different services for each student that addresses their unique needs. That is why I depend on the Center for Career Development and why I am a career champion. In many ways, I see them as partners in developing my students into competent adults who are also solid school citizens. So for example, students' unique needs appear in the form of honoring their religious or philosophical practices with an appropriate placement, recognizing their abilities when we might only register their disability or a disability, inquiring about responsibilities to their immediate families, parental commitments, and work obligations, showing some curiosity about one student's inability to complete his or her work, because we know housing and food insecurity are real challenges. Concerning ourselves with their future, not just a final grade or their midterm notices of failure. Acknowledging that the events of the last year have diminished us all in some way, and students are a vulnerable group in all this. They have limited vocabulary for expressing what they feel, and they feel powerless to protect themselves. To that end, our classroom and our campus may be their only defense or emotional armor. In essence, studying the materiality of our students' lives, their standpoint, and the boundaries that we sometimes miss when we make assumptions, while demonstrating fidelity to our view of the world, not a worldview as intercultural practices dictate we do, is a good place to start, and where our career coaches are practical partners. This, for me, is my activism. The Brazilian educator Paulo Freire told us, "I didn't understand anything because of my hunger. I wasn't dumb. It wasn't a lack of interest. My social condition didn't allow me to have an education. Experiences showed me once again the relationship between social class and knowledge." For our students and neighbors, it is no longer just finding a job, but also finding one close enough to maintain family ties, because as first generation students, they are most likely to have close and extended familial and intergenerational kinships. In thinking about the intercultural features of our students, in the case of ethnic heritage, family interaction may be primarily responsible for preserving these kinds of cultural agreements where a student forgoes the expectations of traditional college life for familial obligations. So it becomes more critical to ask a student, do you have a resume? Not, is your resume updated? It is likely that student was unable to work outside of the home because his or her college years were also spent as a primary caretaker for a family member or a cultural mediator for his or her family. But here's the thing. I must invariably take all factors into consideration when I advise students, and especially when I refer them to our career coaches at the Center for Career Development. It is not a catch-all, but they're fully equipped for all things related to our students' professional future, success, and general next steps. I also tell students to be clear about their requirements, because our career coaches are a lot of things, but they're not mind readers. Go in with a plan. I have never been so honored as to be in the company of the competent members of our career center, and let me explain this. When I first started at UConn, I was excited to get CCD's notices of career fairs and resume and cover letter workshops. Earlier, I mentioned the importance of these services throughout my life and hoped my students would find them equally beneficial. So I started giving extra credit to students for attending workshops or career fairs as an introduction to these important services available to them. What I discovered was that students really didn't know what they didn't know, and were often surprised that they could apply for summer jobs, part-time jobs, volunteer positions, permanent jobs, and internships through this office. They also were not aware that our career coaches are experts in their fields, and they're getting these services as part of a UConn commitment to their successful transition as alumni. I say to my students all the time, if we are unleashing you on the world, we want you to at least be prepared, having learned how to effectively communicate in an interview. Eventually, I thought it was crucial that students know their career coaches. As a result, I invite them to my class before a career fair. So students, my class is before a career fair, so students are made aware of opportunities available to them and also become familiar with a career coach with whom they can have a trusting relationship. This is particularly important for students with cultural boundaries who perceive access to our career coaches in terms of cultural and economic boundaries. I remind them often that they will not be undergraduate students forever. Well, that is not our plan for them anyway. You might be surprised to know that a resume for some students is a very private document because of what they believe it reveals about them. This speaks to an intercultural understanding of what we'll call an interpretive document, because resumes are interpreted by whoever evaluates them, even when they do not have the benefit of a face-to-face interaction. A name, a semi or paraprofessional position, or address listed on a resume can be perceived in a way the subject of the resume had not intended. So ensuring their familiarity with our career coaches, in my experience, prompts students to be proactive and also less reticent in building that relationship. I am unclear about the exact time my relationship with the center transitioned to one of dependency, but I've been clear about the importance of being connected for my students, and it has been an organic and continuous relationship. Today, much of the content of my professional communications class that I inherited from our late Michael Ego comes from the center's best practices. Thank you, Jessica Fuller. Each fall, I invite our Stanford career coaches, Tara Malone and Susan O'Connor, to put my students through the paces with informational interviews, where they are assessed in real time. Students' feedback has been positive and resounding. In many cases, they build an ongoing relationship with our career coaches, and specifically with Tara and Susan. But let me circle back to the intercultural process of serving our students. Freire's pedagogy of literacy education involved not only reading the word, according to his biographer, but he thought about reading the world. This involved the development of critical consciousness that allowed people to question the nature of their historical social situation, to read their world, their standpoint. His pedagogy was to a dialogic education in which he tried to understand students' expectations based on their circumstances. Again, their standpoint. Freire's pedagogy begins with the teacher mingling among the community, asking questions of the people and gathering a list of words in their daily lives. The teacher was to start understanding the social reality of the people and develop a list of generative words and themes, which could lead to discussion in classes or cultural circles. As far as Freire was concerned, by making words relevant to the lives of people, the process of critical consciousness could begin, in which the social construction of reality might be critically examined. I see my role as an educator and student advocate in this institution in the same way. Career coaches are the part of the language I use to ensure my students transition to the next productive phase of their lives. In addition to required coursework, I'm convinced that life skills provided by our career coaches should also be a fundamental part of the academic experiences. If I could make this a requirement, I would. I can only do that in my class. Students may not always use a particular course, but they will always use those resume and cover letter writing skills, informational interview strategies, as well as the networking ability honed at a career fair mixer. My teaching statement refers to cultural circles as sources of non-linear knowledge making. These circles can include experiences we believe are necessary for successful transmission of information to our students. As a career champion, that includes information made available by our allies in the center. Earlier, I alluded to the simplicity of having received a post-retirement recommendation from a 9-year-old. And this is why I admit that my commitment to the Center for Career as the Center for Career Development as a career champion is a no-brainer. Again, I see them as partners in a community consistently contributing to our students' overall development and readiness for the world. Even a 9-year-old, I believe, would see this as a valuable function, an aspect of being an educator in general, and a significant aspect of our students' lives as an advocate particularly. So if I've not convinced you yet Let me end by bringing you back to David Letterman's circa 2015 with my top 10 reasons why I believe in the importance of being a career champion. All right, number 10. It is indisputable that our career coaches at the Center for Career Development are professionals who are specifically trained to assist with career-related concerns. Number 9. The services are also available to anyone in the UConn community considering a career change or needing a jump start on a job search. Number 8, it's the best way to help students, staff, and faculty figure out what we want to do with our lives next and how to go about doing it. And I'm sorry, crossing guard is already taken. Number 7, a weekly listing of opportunities for students and constantly updated website to navigate every possibility and handshake is a godsend. Number 6, best career fairs ever. Number 5, access to UConn alumni from everywhere doing all sorts of things, even those we could not imagine were career choices. Number 4, go for the thorough resume and cover letter writing workshops, leave with a personal career coach. Number 3, my life has been made exponentially easier with the modules provided for my professional communications class. Download, sit back, and relax. Again, thank you, Jessica. Number 2, after a meeting with Tara and Susan on the Stanford campus, my students appear far more proficient in everything, even those unrelated to job searches. And the number 1 reason I believe the importance of being a career champion is that students are paying for access to a global post-life of resources, UConn life of resources, and we're all welcome to use it. So thank you all so very much for indulging me, and I hope you leave this experience knowing there is something to be gained and really nothing to be lost by being a career champion. And let me suggest that you try for yourself. Here's to a better summer, everyone. Thank you.